Spill Sports Show. Matt Reynoldson.
I've always been told I have the face for radio, and now I'm making it happen.
David Eickholt.
It's utter blasphemy. It blows my mind.
Scott Ayers.
The next time they make the playoffs, I'll be running for president.
Spend your Thursday drive time with the Spill Sports Show. Every week from 3 to 5 on KRNU.
Woo! Bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out. It's hard to yell when the barrel's in your mouth. Come on.
You're listening to the Spill Sports Show on KRNU.
Just gotta do what I gotta do, and when I gotta do it, you know. So basically, just doing what I gotta do every time I step on the court and do what I gotta do.
Now, your drive time entertainment. Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy! It's a home run!
Man, woman, and child did that. Put them in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes.
You believe in miracles? Yes!
Comes to LeBron. He takes a fadeaway for the win. Hey! Knocked it down!
There goes Davis. Oh, my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened! What a time to be alive!
Hit me with the horn, 20. Keep making noise. Keep making noise. Yeah. Oh. Here we go now. 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 Check it out.
Welcome in to another edition of the Spill Sports Show on your Thursday afternoon drive time. A little wet drive time this afternoon as we walked and drove over here in the pouring rain. Kind of a gloomy Thursday in Lincoln, but getting all the clouds out of the way so they can clear by Saturday evening. Nebraska welcoming in Wisconsin this week in one of the biggest matchups in Memorial Stadium in at least a few years, and everything's in front of Nebraska right now as far as the Big Ten West goes, sitting at 2-0 in conference after beating Rutgers and Illinois in consecutive weeks, the last 2 weeks. And Nebraska may have turned over a new leaf. We'll talk about that and a lot more today. We'll cover a little bit of the NFL, MLB playoffs starting off, and Scotty doesn't want to talk about that because his Rockies are out of it.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Yeah, Rocktober was a short month this year.
October was a very short month for Scotty's Rockies. We'll talk about the outlook for the MLB playoffs, and we will talk to a Wisconsin Rivals reporter coming up in our next segment to preview the Badgers. But starting off, guys, one of the big storylines going into this week is that Nebraska may get a very important player or two back from injury, and that's Chris Jones and Josh Kalu, who have been practicing this week. David?
Yeah, it's going to be huge. And this is the game, I think, Chris Jones, when he first got injured, I think this was his goal. This was his target, is to come back and play and help with this team. But the thing is, I don't know what type of role he'll play. There's been no speculation. And I need to say this as well. I don't like seeing Barstool trying to tweet out Husker news. They're trying to say that Chris Jones is coming back next week. There's been no word, but all sources have indicated, at least from our speculation standpoint, that Chris Jones will be playing. So I just want to put them on blast because that is absolutely not true at all.
Barstool's a fan account on the equivalent of Tunnel Walk of Shame, but not as funny.
Here's how the thing was quoted. It said, sources say Chris Jones will be back for Ohio State week, and he's telling the team that. No, he's not telling the team that. So I'm shutting that down right now.
If it's up to Chris Jones, he'll be back this weekend, and I think he will be.
Yeah, I think he will be too.
By all accounts, and from what we've seen him running around, cutting in practice in full pads this week. We saw him yesterday or Tuesday practice in full pads because we are able to watch the beginning of practice, and he was practicing in full pads. He just needs to get back up to speed.
He's been jogging for 2 months.
Yeah.
I remember about a month after the injury, you and I looked at each other. We're like, is that Chris Jones? And he's sitting there jogging on and off the field. And I'm like, I don't know how he's doing this right now.
Yeah, and for the opener, he was on the sidelines, catching footballs with guys. And I think if it's up to Chris Jones, he's back this week. But Scott, you need to really consider what kind of role he will play in this game after not starting a football game for almost 10 months.
Well, absolutely, and not only that, he needs to be careful with his own degree of pace coming back because the last thing you want to see is have him rush onto the field. Next thing you know, he's getting re-injured. And now that's just a smaller possibility, but it's still a risk.
Remember that time with DeMornay last season as well.
Exactly, and so that's why you don't want to rush those things. And let's say he does come back and play, you can't expect him to be playing every single snap. I would think it would be more of a limited playing time, just because when you come back from a fairly severe injury, and you can practice and all that, but there's a huge difference in game time speed as opposed to coming back and practicing.
That's what Dante Williams said, defensive backs coach for Nebraska, said that's going to be one of his biggest adjustments. He needs to be able to get in-game reps, and that's something that he's been stressing, and tackling. And Chris Jones would be a nice stable to have back there tackling, because he's more of a technique guy versus I'm going to beat you with my athleticism.
And the big thing for Chris Jones right now is that it was surgically repaired, so it's not as much of a re-injury risk as something like a hamstring that Josh Kalu is dealing with. But he came back to practice, full speed at practice this week. And David, do you think we'll see Josh Kalu this week? And if we do, what role does Antonio Reed, who has played very good defense over the past few weeks, what role does he play if Josh Kalu comes back?
I think that's the struggle, is you want Kalu out there because I think he's your best all-around defensive secondary guy, as in safety, corner. He can
come
fit
down
in where
and
you
run
need to be.
too, better than any guy in the secondary they have right now.
Chris Jones, that's something that he improved on a lot in the second half of last season. But I think Joshua Kalu is a guy that you need to have him back because he's one of your best players. But Antonio Reed, this is a guy that the switch just flipped on for him. There have been times, last year, even near the beginning, where we're like, why? What is he doing? He's out of position. Why would you try to tackle a guy with your arms? Then all of a sudden, he's just making big play after big play. And you're like, who is that? That's Reed again? And he's just been firing on all cylinders everywhere.
And, there's speculation. It is a young secondary, Lamar Jackson and Eric Lee, of course, being those two starting corners. Now, there's speculation, if Kalu's healthy, could he be inserted at one of those corner positions? You see Antonio Reed stay at the safety spot. You bulk up that defense a little bit more, because it's fair to say that the corner position has been shaky for Nebraska. They've had issues throughout this season, and they've really picked up their game lately. But still, even in that Illinois game, a couple pass interference calls against Eric Lee. Is that a possibility? If Reed keeps playing well, do you see putting Kalu at that corner position?
And speaking of corners supplanting each other, if Chris Jones is able to make it back, if Josh Kalu is able to make it back on a field corner side, that puts Lamar Jackson back at boundary corner, which I think he can thrive at, because he has struggled mightily at that field side position covering. He has struggled a lot with soft coverage. He does a lot better with press coverage, but with soft coverage, he's seen a lot of trouble tackling, which is something Dante Williams emphasized this week.
Yeah, and I think that's been a really shaky thing for the secondary. But I think the biggest key that we're ignoring here is what's been the biggest weak point of this defense this season.
It's been the corners.
I think it's been that, but here it's the deep ball. There's been so many times every deep ball they've gotten beat, but they haven't faced the quarterbacks that can hit those with a lot of accuracy. And they were playing 10 yards off the Illinois receivers, and they flew by him. That's why Eric Lee picked up, one of his pass interferences just to stop the guy from being able to take it to the house. So maybe that wasn't the worst pass interference decision by him in that call. But getting Joshua Kalu back as a guy that they're going to think twice before trying to go deep, because if they face up against a quarterback who can hit those, that is big, big, big danger zone. But to go back to tackling, Jonathan Taylor has been absolutely outstanding for Wisconsin. He has been a guy that really came out of nowhere, really taken up that number one spot on this Badger depth chart. But this is a guy that's gone for over 200 yards in a game, over 175 yards in a game. He's a guy who knows how to put touchdowns on the board, and he's averaging 7.5 yards a carry this season. So their tackling is going to need to go back to technique versus raw athleticism and going for the big hit, which I think has been a weak point for the secondary.
And Nebraska has not been gashed by big plays on the ground this season. Opponents, the past three games, as far as big plays will concern, we'll take a look at Mitch Sherman from ESPN's statistical analysis of the Nebraska defense these past three games and this season. Opponents in the past three games have produced one play of more than 20 yards and 6 drives of more than 40 yards. Nebraska has allowed 2 rushes of more than 20 yards all season, and less than 100 yards on the ground to 4 out of 5 opponents, while reducing the passing yardage in each of its foes in its last 5 games. So improvement is certainly very palpable for this Nebraska defense, but it's been a big emphasis for the defense itself. When you talk to any of the defensive players, they want to stop the ground game, and they've done that pretty much against every team not named Oregon. And Oregon didn't gash them. It felt like Royce Freeman had a very quiet 150, but still 150.
Exactly, and Jonathan Taylor will keep Nebraska's defense really on their heels all game, but this is a guy who only rushed for 80 yards against Northwestern. He did rush for just over 4 yards a carry, but one of Nebraska's key to success is making Hornibrook beat them in the air because, he's had a pretty good season, 9 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, but he did throw 2 interceptions against Northwestern, a team that really isn't all too tough in the Big Ten. So for Nebraska to be successful, I really do think that they have to limit Taylor. Something they've been able to do all year is limiting the ground game. And as you mentioned, in the Oregon game, Freeman did have 150 yards, but in the second half, it really seemed like they kept him pretty quiet. And so that's going to be a huge emphasis, is can they prevent Taylor from having those big plays that we've seen him have so far this year?
Yeah, and they're going to need to. Another big question mark is, if you're talking big play and playmakers, you need to mention Troy Fumagalli, who is still questionable, and All-American candidate tight end for Wisconsin, and their leading receiver with 15 catches and 3 touchdowns. Fun fact, and I did not know this, you guys might call me dumb for it, he only has 9 fingers. Troy Fumagalli lost a finger in a blender accident when he was a kid.
There's a lot of finger puns you could probably make with his name.
Yeah,
Mr. Pun Master.
I thought about it, but I don't really want to get booed
Troy
this early.
Ouchie.
That was a bad one.
I actually thought that was pretty good.
That wasn't even a great attempt.
But another guy that I think you'll need to watch out for, Danny Davis III. Quintez has been another deep threat for them. But the thing is, Hornibrook does not throw a great deep ball. And that's something that I did mention that would be the big key. But the thing is, Wisconsin knows who they are. They put Hornibrook and that offense in a position to succeed. They may not be explosive. They may sometimes get the big runs or whatever, but they don't make very many bad play calls, and each play has a chance to really go the distance for them. So that's just smart, disciplined Wisconsin football, I think, at its finest.
But here's a few things to consider with the Wisconsin personnel formations. If Fumagalli can't go, or if he can go and then re-aggravates that hamstring, which is very likely with hamstring injuries. We've seen it a lot throughout college and the NFL. That first speed cut you make at game speed tends to be a little bit hard on an injured hamstring, especially when it's not something that has been, surgically repaired or rehabbed for a long time. Pretty fresh injury for Fumagalli. So if he is not able to go, Austin Ramish, the fullback, will play an H-back role, according to many Wisconsin sites and Wisconsin people in the know about Wisconsin football. Austin Ramish would play a H-back type, which would take him out of the backfield usually and put him in a tight end spot. So how does that affect the Wisconsin run game? I think you also need to consider Jonathan Taylor. This is his first road environment that he started in. BYU was Wisconsin outdid the BYU fans at BYU's stadium. There were more
BYU's bad this year though too. BYU is not good.
There were more Badger fans in Provo, and that was I think I read somewhere that was the top liquor selling day in Provo, Utah in something like 10 years.
Probably, I'd say history.
Probably top 3 all time. Wisconsin fans coming to Provo, Utah, overdoing the BYU very heavily LDS fan base, not an alcohol-consuming fan base by any means for the majority of them. So, Wisconsin outdid the BYU fan base in Provo. And so this is the first real road environment that the freshman's going into, a night game. Nebraska's won 20 straight home night games. It's going to be a crazy atmosphere on Saturday night in Lincoln. So definitely something to consider with the fresh Wisconsin running back if he'll be up to the test. But if he's not, they have 2 other very good options in Bradrick Shaw and Chris James, Scott.
Yeah, and that always seems to be the case for Wisconsin, is they have so many viable threats on the ground game. But I want to focus on Taylor because his big outing came up against Florida Atlantic, where he had over 200 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and really thrived in that game. But Nebraska has been a tough 3-4 defense, so yards are not going to be easy to come by, I think, for either team. And I think that's what's so exciting about this game is both teams run that 3-4 defense. And so can can the linebackers fill those holes for Nebraska against Taylor and these pair of Wisconsin running backs?
You know, I've kind of sat on this one a lot, but I think Bob Diaco really summarized it well. Because I still think the biggest key of the game is two things. It's Nebraska's offensive line versus a very feisty Wisconsin defensive line. So they're going to give Tanner Lee time to throw. But I still think Jonathan Taylor has to be the biggest key of the game and the secondary tackling. Bob Diaco said when describing Taylor, he's a big tackle breaker, thick lower body, thick body, great at breaking tackles. Said something else.
But so is
big
Shaw,
time
too.
tackle breaker.
And so is Shaw.
But he said big-time tackle breaker 3 times in a span of about 10 seconds when describing Jonathan Taylor. And the good news is for this defense that Nebraska has now, compared to last year, when a guy breaks the tackle, there's 3 and 4 more jerseys there. What's it been like in years past? You miss a tackle, 10, 15 yards more downfield before he's faced with another opponent. So I think this is where the 3-4 defense really gets tested. Because the last 3 weeks, no offense to any of those teams, they are not good offenses. They are all bottom 90, I think 94th was the best offense they've played.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a real test, especially since Wisconsin is a big-time running team.
And Wisconsin's going to have quite a test on the offensive end as well with Nebraska's defense. The best defense Wisconsin has faced so far is ranked 70th in BYU, and BYU's defense has to be on the field a lot of the time because their offense is pretty hapless. So BYU's defense, obviously the best that Wisconsin has faced so far, closely followed by Northwestern, but they haven't faced a juggernaut offense yet. And so very, very interesting to see, or they haven't faced a juggernaut defense yet, so it'll be very interesting to see whether Wisconsin can move the ball against a Nebraska defense that has really bowed up. I will say Wisconsin's defensive line, front seven, has the decided advantage against Nebraska's offensive line. But I'll also say, with the way Nebraska's defensive line has played lately, I give them the advantage against against Wisconsin's offensive line, because Wisconsin's offensive line is much more inexperienced than we've seen in quite a while out of Madison.
Yeah, and man, what an interesting time for both of these teams. I mean, it's such a clear advantage for Wisconsin's defensive line. And with David Neville coming back, if he's able to assume that starting role, I mean, there are some tough players on that Wisconsin team. Chris Orr, who has 2 sacks and 24 total tackles on the season. Garrett Dooley, 4 sacks and 7 tackles for a loss. Those are 2 names that you will probably be hearing constantly in this game on Saturday. And that pass rush is just mean for Wisconsin. So, and as we know, Tanner Lee, far worse under pressure, really struggles to get outside the pocket and throw the ball away. So if he doesn't get time to throw, it could be ugly for Lee.
This is not a shot at David Neville, but I'm fairly certain that Nebraska fans will have a fit if he starts and Hymas doesn't.
And he can't play hurt. He has proven in past years, if he's not 100%.
Not to be that guy, can he play healthy?
We've seen him do some good things healthy, especially with that body type. You know, he has a strong body type, but he struggles with any pain.
You know, you're exactly right. You know, you and I have talked about a couple of times, Matt. Every time he falls, we cringe because we're just afraid he's going to get hurt. But, Sky, we'll get into this more a little bit later, but I think you're exactly right. The offensive line needs to protect because Tanner Lee has not proven the ability to throw the ball away. So if Wisconsin can force him into making quick decisions when the pocket's collapsing, it could spell bad news for Nebraska's offense, especially if they can't get the run game going.
Well, we'll preview the Badgers coming up a little bit more. Coming up next, we'll have a Wisconsin Rivals writer on here in studio to talk about the Badgers and discuss the keys to the game for Saturday's matchup. That's coming up next. Keep it right here on the Spill Sports Show.
Dad, I'm hungry. Why don't we have anything to eat?
Those are words you never want to hear as a parent. But unfortunately, putting food on the table is a constant struggle for many low-income families here in Lincoln, and they don't have the necessary skills to get and maintain a job. They rely on volunteers at the Center for People in Need that can help them through the struggle. You can make a difference in their lives by getting involved in one of the many volunteer programs that the Center for People in Need offers. For more information, please visit centerforpeopleinneed.org.
Hey, what's up? Holla at ya, boy. XOXOXO. You getting these texts? Question mark. Where are you? What are you doing? OMG, you are making me mad. You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Relentless, aggressive texting is like sending an angry robot to deliver your message. When does the robot become dangerous? Let us know at that'snotcool.com.
That'snotcool.com.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
How to be a great dad in 15 seconds. Bike ride, go fish, walk in the park, phone call, milkshake, play catch, picnic, fly a kite, tell jokes, laugh, talk, read a story, tell a story, bumper car, swing set, bowling, pillow fight, cut loose, stay tight. Whew. Because the smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
To all living things, and it's all thanks to trees. Not only do trees supply oxygen, they also provide homes to wildlife, filter water, and let's not forget their natural beauty. But the trees need your help. The Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation is doing their part to revitalize forests across the country, and you can help. Donate to the Nebraska Arbor Day Foundation today by visiting www.arborday.org. Be that breath of fresh air and ensure forests live on for future generations.
What are you still doing with all those old t-shirts that don't even fit anymore? Why not get rid of them by donating them to Goodwill of Lincoln? Goodwill of Lincoln is a not-for-profit organization that takes nearly any household item and item of clothing. Its main mission is willing workers employed and community resources maximized. Goodwill also provides a safe environment for people with mental, physical, and emotional disabilities to be employed. So what are you still doing with those t-shirts? Your freshman 15 is less noticeable in a slightly bigger shirt anyway. Donate the small ones to Goodwill of Lincoln. To contact Goodwill of Lincoln, go to lincolngoodwill.org.
Back here on the Spill Sports Show, live and worldwide on KRNU2. Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers, welcoming in John Veldhuis of BadgerBlitz.com. John, thanks so much for being with us today to preview this weekend's matchup.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's get right into it. The elephant in the room, Troy Fumagalli, the All-American candidate for Wisconsin, questionable this week with a hamstring injury. What do you know about the status of him?
So it sounds like that he's going to be ready to play. Having him be out for their game against Northwestern last week came as a surprise. He was not listed on their initial injury report for the week or on Thursday, but I guess they came to a decision on Friday night that he was not going to be ready to go. And it looked like maybe that was an either or thing. They decided to hold him out against Northwestern. It sounds like he has practiced all week, and at least it's some capacity. And Paul Chris said today that Troy Fumagalli has been able to kind of add to his workload in practice each day. So signs are positive for Fumagalli that he's going to be able to go. I mean, but I never want to say he's absolutely going to play just because the injury last week certainly came as a bit of a surprise. But it seems like at this point he's going to be available.
Certainly a big addition to the Wisconsin offense. He has really been Alex Hornibrook's security blanket this year, but Hornibrook has taken a big step into his sophomore year. What are you seeing from him so far this year that has really helped him manage the offense well?
I think the big thing is confidence. I mean, just from watching him in the spring, after he and Bart Houston kind of rotated at that quarterback spot for most of last year, once Hornibrook was able to take the job and really kind of own it. I mean, he spent a lot of time during the off season going to different clinics and working out with a private quarterback coach or two, getting some extra work in. And I think you just saw him, really own the job and stake his claim to it really early. And the Badgers didn't have a ton of depth behind him going into this season, but I think he knew right away that this was his job, and he really kind of stepped up to the plate and got his work in, and the Badgers treated him like he was their easy, no question starter really from the start of the spring. I mean, he took, as far as I can remember, pretty much every rep in red zone work during the practices that have been open to the media during the spring and the fall. So they knew that he was going to be their guy. He knew that he was going to be the guy, and I think he really benefited from that. You combine that with the experience of playing reasonably well as a redshirt freshman last year, even if the Badgers did have Bart Houston in there a little bit. I think that combination really worked in his favor, and you're kind of seeing that play out on the field in these first couple of games here.
Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers talking with John Veldhuis of BadgerBlitz.com.
John, thanks again for joining us. What's kind of the buzz around Madison for this game? How are the fans feeling about it?
I feel like the Nebraska game is always a big one. I mean, it's a storied college football program. One of Wisconsin's rivals in the Big Ten West, and they know that if the Badgers can beat Nebraska this year in particular, that sets them up to be in a pretty good spot in the Big Ten West, just because Nebraska and Wisconsin are the only teams left in their division that haven't lost a conference game, and to be undefeated and to have that win over the Cornhuskers, it gives them a tiebreaker too. So in a sense, it's like having a 2-game lead, even though it's kind of a 1-game lead in the standings. But so I think the players, the fans, they all know that this is a pretty big week. Obviously there's a lot of connections and similarities between the two programs, and I think anytime that you can go in and beat a team like Nebraska, if you can pull it off, that it bodes well for your season overall. So I mean, we'll see if the Badgers can go in and do that this year. But I think from the team and the fans' perspective, I mean, even the fact that it's a trophy game, I think here with it being a newer trophy, that gets a little overlooked sometimes. But I mean, there's a lot of reasons why the Badgers are really hyped up for this game, and we'll just have to see how that carries over into when they actually start playing.
And the Wisconsin Badgers, obviously, with a lot of different threats, Jonathan Taylor and Troy Fumagalli being two of them. But who is a threat on this offensive threat on this Wisconsin team that Nebraska fans should really look out for, that might not be getting the same amount of attention as these two players?
So yeah, you mentioned Fumagalli, their number one. He's leading the team in, I believe, catches and receiving yards so far this year, even though he missed the one game. But having him out there has really opened up Wisconsin's passing game to the point where they have a good couple of options to where if a team has a way that they can kind of cover up Fumagalli, it opens up the rest of the field for Wisconsin's younger wide receivers to go out and get open. And so a guy that has really stepped up this year and kind of become their number one receiver, he's just a sophomore. His name's Quintez Cephas. He's a bigger body. He's a deep threat. He had a big play down the field that could have been a touchdown if the ball had been just a little farther out of him, and instead of him having to kind of adjust his route to go get the ball. But he's been a big play guy ever since the spring, and he kind of worked his way in a little bit as a true freshman last year. He's got a basketball background, and he's a big body. And I think the thing is that Alex Hornibrook really trusts him in that if he puts the ball up in a spot where Cephas can go get it. Cephas is a guy that can use his size and his strength to really outduel a defensive back for the ball, and if he makes the catch, fight for some extra yardage. I mean, we've seen a couple times this year where they'll find Cephas, and maybe it's near the line to gain, and he just has a way of kind of falling forward to kind of compare it to a running back, or just kind of turn his body in a way where he can get that extra yard or two. And so that's been a big weapon for the Badgers to have. And I guess, after watching him in the spring and in the fall, it's not so surprising that he's kind of become their number one receiver. But, I mean, especially when, their number one receiver from last year came back, J.S. Peavy. But, he's saw some of his targets go to some of the other players, and Cephas is definitely one of the guys that's benefited the most.
And Peavy probably drawing the number one corner from the other team, the number one defensive back, quite a lot.
Yep, so, and that's a big part of it, too.
Yeah, maybe not quite as many targets toward Peavy from Hornibrook, but talking with John Veldhuis of BadgerBlitz.com, previewing the Wisconsin versus Nebraska game. Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers with you. And what are some things that you still are concerned about with Wisconsin? Obviously, a top 10 team, have been winning pretty sound in most of their games, had a little bit of a scare toward the end against Northwestern, but slow starts in the first half have really plagued Wisconsin this season. What's been a part of that?
It's hard to say. Because they've had a good couple of games where they started a little slow, and I think sometimes it's a confidence issue where maybe it kind of takes them a little while to get going and string a couple of first downs together. But then once they're able to do that and have good drives, then from that point their offense has kind of been off to the races in some of these games. So I think that might be part of it. It's interesting. I mean, but that didn't really affect them in their game against BYU, where they got off to a big start and they really didn't let off the gas at all. So I think it's a combination of things. You want to see the offense in particular have some early success if you're a Badger fan. The defense in general has been great for the most part through these first couple of games. The one concern is that obviously they kind of let Northwestern back into the game a little bit with those 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. So, and afterward, I think the guys saying without saying that maybe they got to a point where they were up 3 scores or so, and maybe the foot came off the gas a little bit. So that in a sense it might be a good thing to have that kind of wake up call to say, hey, this is the Big Ten. You can't just play 3 quarters of good football and expect that to win you a game. You need to go out and play all 4 quarters. So maybe they take that this most recent game, and if you learn that lesson, then that could bode well for the future. But I think that's the thing is seeing if the team can get off to a quicker start offensively, and then make sure that they play that great level of defense for all 4 quarters, and then maybe even to overtime if you have to go there.
I'm a big picture guy. Scotty, I know you like to have that third kind of big threat besides Fumagalli and Taylor, but, I like the big stars. So I'm going to stick with Jonathan Taylor here. How has Taylor, as a true freshman, really been able to emerge himself as, I would say, arguably the second best running back in the Big Ten behind Saquon Barkley? How has he really emerged for this team, and how did he earn the respect from the coaching staff this early in his career?
So Jonathan Taylor is definitely one of the sharpest, brightest freshmen that I have covered, and I've covered the team since like 2010 or 2011. So it's been a couple years now, but he's super he's super quick. He picked up the offense really, really quickly, and this is he didn't enroll early. He was on campus for his first preseason work with the Badgers was this fall. It's not like he enrolled early, had a chance to learn the offense, and then kind of hit a new gear in fall camp. He it took him like 2 weeks or so to kind of get acclimated, but then unluckily for me as a media member, once the practices got closed down, he apparently really started to kind of take his game to another level, and really impress the coaches and his teammates in a couple of scrimmages that they had in their preseason camp. And from that point, he earned his spot as kind of a co-starter early on, and then Bradrick Shaw, another guy that the Badgers kind of thought was going to be one of their lead tailbacks this year, he I think he was held out of their second game against Florida Atlantic, and Jonathan Taylor had a big game against the Owls, and it's just kind of been off to the races for him since then. And so I think they're just going to ride him as long as they can, and see just what he can do as a true freshman. I mean, he's really special. He reminds me of James White back in 2010 when he really started to make an impact for the Badgers as a true freshman. It can take a little while for guys to pick up the offense and really start to make plays, but that time was not an issue for Jonathan Taylor. He was there right away, and he's impressed pretty much everybody so far.
Yeah, and obviously the offense has been impressive, but it's been Wisconsin's defense. It feels like year in, year out, they just provide just such a tough matchup for whoever they play, and this week is no different. Nebraska's offensive line has really struggled this year, and against this Badgers front four that is looking well over, I believe they have like 16 or something sacks on the season, have really gotten to the quarterback this year. What's going to be the toughest matchup for Nebraska's offensive line against a tough Wisconsin pass rush?
So I think we saw in the non-conference season, the Badgers they still run their 3-4 defense, but they're on their third coordinator in 3 years. Now it's Jim Leonard, former UW star athlete, had a good couple years in the NFL. He's only in his second year as an assistant coach at the college level, but they promoted him to be defensive coordinator. And we saw a lot of kind of base, vanilla-ish defense through their first couple of games. I think that they just didn't really want to show that much and put a lot of stuff onto tape for teams to see once they started getting into Big Ten play. But this last week against Northwestern, the Badgers really started to kind of dial up the pressure a little bit and show some different looks. They had some different blitzes and blitz concepts, out of the same package with similar looks for the offense when they're doing their pre-snap kind of evaluation. And that resulted in a really big game for Wisconsin's pass rush. I think it was 8 sacks in that game, so you really saw that kind of tick up in the last week. I'm curious to see if that's going to continue this week, or if the Badgers thought that maybe there was just a specific matchup that they thought they could really win by dialing up a little extra pressure than what they had shown in their non-conference season. But I think that's the thing that you really want to watch, is just how often, and then just how are the Badgers going after Nebraska when they drop back to pass, because the Badgers trust their secondary. It's a group that has a lot of speed. There's a lot of talented players in there, and when you trust your secondary to be on an island a little bit and play man-to-man coverage, it allows Jim Leonard to come up with some creative ways to blitz, and he can send more numbers than offenses can block. And so I'm really interested to see if that carries over into week 2 of Big Ten play for the Badgers.
Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers with John Veldhuis of BadgerBlitz.com. And John, one more thing before we get you out of here.
Sure.
The 3-4 defense is another matchup that you'll see within this game. 2 very similar teams run pro-style offenses, and 2 very close games the past couple of years. A last-minute field goal for Wisconsin 2 years ago, won it in Lincoln, and then overtime, obviously, last year. What makes these 2 teams so similar when it often looks like Wisconsin has the edge on paper? And do you see another matchup like that Saturday night?
Yeah, I think it would be a pretty it really could be the game of the year in the Big Ten West in terms of determining who ends up winning the division and going on to play in the league championship game. And so I think for one thing, there's always a lot of energy for this game just because of where the 2 programs are at. I think they're pretty similar in terms of the type of athlete and players that they can recruit, and they both develop their players well over a good couple of years or so, and so I think that has kind of allowed both teams to really kind of become in a sense mirror images of each other. And I mean, just to even add on top of it, I mean, Paul Christ and Mike Riley go back a long way, with Chris having worked for Riley on a couple of different occasions, or worked with him, and they've been friends for a long time, and so that's just another connection that you can add on top of this. And I think it just comes down to 2 pretty similar programs. They're a lot alike in terms of how they're going to try and move the ball on offense. They're similar in terms of they've both in the past and now, wanted to make great defensive play and identity for their teams. And so I think that kind of plays into, the close games that you see. I see another close one, coming up this weekend. I think the Badgers would win, if I had to make a prediction, by about maybe a touchdown or so. So maybe not quite as much as the pregame spreads are saying, but I think it's going to be an exciting game, to be sure.
John Veldhuis, BadgerBlitz.com. John, you making the trip to Lincoln this weekend?
I am, absolutely. First time for me.
First time for you. So what are some places in Madison? We'll tell you some places in Lincoln, but what are some places in Madison next year that Husker fans need to hit?
Well, if you can wander around on State Street for a while before or after the game, that's always going to be a cool environment. It's not right next to the stadium, but it's just off of campus as you kind of go into downtown in the city. There's all sorts of cool bars and restaurants around there. But if you want some, good food around the stadium, it's a place called Mickey's Dairy Bar, which makes excellent breakfast food, pancakes, sausages, hash browns. There's a line out the door every weekend, even if there's not a football game. And to be honest, I come into the stadium from a different way, so I haven't seen the line on game day in a while, but I imagine it's crazy. So if you're going to go whenever the Huskers are in town next, make sure you get there bright and early because you're going to want to establish a spot in line quick if you want some good food before the game.
And that'll be next year during conference play. John, thanks so much for being with us, and enjoy your time in Lincoln this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And coming up next, we'll talk a little bit of MLB playoffs as Rocktober ended very quickly. Very quickly here in October. So we'll talk about the AL Division Series and the NL Division Series. That's coming up next. Stay with us right here on the Spill Sports Show.
I'm Steve Clements, businessman and cyclist.
I'm Jeff Weimeister, Chief Deputy Sheriff and cyclist.
Riding on roads can be dangerous when motorists are not cautious. A year ago, I was hit by a car while biking in the county.
Cyclists have a legal right to use the road, and drivers must give them at least 3 feet of space. It's the law.
Cyclists should wear helmets, be highly visible, and use lights after dark.
We can share the road safely.
Learn more at lincoln.ne.gov.
Imagine never being able to drive, to watch TV, or even read Harry Potter. Reading is essential to our lives. City Impact Reading Center helps Lincoln Public Elementary Schools boost their students' reading scores by getting all students at or above their grade's reading level. Each week, volunteers of all ages go sit and read with students. You can help a student gain an important life skill and help change their future. If you're looking for some rewarding volunteer experiences, please visit their website at cityimpact.org.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. The only thing I didn't learn in school today is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov. A message from the Ad Council.
Check out my new time machine.
Does it work?
Hit the button.
Hey, it's Napoleon.
Oui. Check out the future.
Hey, you have a nice house. Why don't I?
You didn't save any money, buddy.
If only there was a way I could go back in time and fix that.
Yeah.
Save something for the future. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free ways to save, go to feedthepig.org. That's feedthepig.org.
This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
Hey, I'm an exchange student, and you can be one too. Don't just sit around and wish you could travel the world. Go do it. You'll see incredible things, make lifelong friends, and change your life in more ways than you can imagine. And hey, scholarships are available, and you may not even have to pay much more than you do now. The helpful team in the Study Abroad office are awaiting your call. So what are you waiting for? Call them now at 402-472-5358. That's 402-472-5358.
Every year, millions of cats are put down because they can't find a home. The Cat House in Lincoln is doing their best to change that, but they need your help. Whether you're looking to adopt or just want to help the cause, the Cat House is the place to go. There are all sorts of ways to get involved, from donating food and other supplies to volunteering. And if you have a cat, make sure to get them spayed or neutered to help cut down on the number of cats in shelters. If you want to make a difference in an animal's life, check out the Cat House or visit their website at cathouse.org.
Back here on the Spill Sports Show. Thanks so much to John Veldhuis of Badger Blitz for coming on today. Talk a little bit of weekend preview for Wisconsin versus Nebraska. That one coming up Saturday night. You can hear it right here on 90.3 KRNU. We'll have your full pregame coverage starting at 4:15 from Catalyst in the Haymarket. That's KRNU kickoff, leading you into 7+ hours of Husker coverage on Saturday evening. That will include Husker Countdown on KRNU, leading to Kellen Havikin's call of Nebraska versus Wisconsin. Top 10 Badgers coming in to Lincoln. But switching gears a little bit to baseball.
Scotty, let's get this rocking
let's
away.
get
How was
this
the
rocking
Colorado
right
game last night?
All right, guys.
Did you catch my
listen
pun?
Up.
Hey,
We need
did
your
you
hot
catch my
baseball
pun?
takes.
All right.
Nobody? Okay.
Listen up. First of all, Rocktober, very short month this year, all right? Rocktober did not go as planned, but what I will say is what an exciting game. How often do you see a relief pitcher hit a triple to drive in 2 runs?
Gets you every time, doesn't it, Sky?
But, David, I don't know if you saw this. He gives up back-to-back home runs in the next half inning.
Yep.
And that's just how the pace of that game went. It was Arizona out to a big lead. Colorado will come back. Classic Colorado pitching, though. Loving to give up a lot of big plays, and they did. They gave up, I think, 4 or 5 triples on the night, and an 11-8 loss. But with that being said, Arizona's a great baseball team. Colorado, very young, picked to finish 4th or last in the NL West. So, impressive season, but there was just no chance that even if they did beat Arizona, they were going to get much farther in the playoffs.
I have real audio of Scotty's call to me last night. Here was him on the phone.
I'm feeling like I want to rage right now.
That was Scott trying to drown his sorrows after Rocktober came to a quick and cruel end. But 2 nights ago, Yankees outlasting the Twins in the wild card game. Are you a Twins fan?
No, I don't like the Yankees.
Oh, okay.
At
I was
all.
gonna say nobody in the world is a Twins fan. I think we've established that, but we didn't think anybody in the world was a Rockies fan until we met Scott Ayers.
Rocktober, baby. Nolan Arenado will be back.
That might be the best WWE impression I've ever heard in my life.
Well, switching gears to the actual division series that are coming up, Yankees, Indians, certainly an interesting one with LeBron James, who's a Yankees fan and an Indians fan, having to choose sides. What do you think about that, David? About Mr. I'm a fan of both Duke and North Carolina?
I am. I admit that. Let's talk about this, though. Where's LeBron's loyalty? Is this where the conspiracy theory starts? I'm saying if
LeBron to the Knicks.
If LeBron to the Knicks.
Carmelo Knicks.
He's taking over with him, Kristaps Porzingis, and Enes Kanter, and Doug McDermott. They're going all the way.
He'd still lead him to the finals.
Dude, Doug McDermott threw down a one-hander the other night, and I don't think I've ever lost my mind as much as I did. It was pretty solid.
You're the only person in the world who watches preseason basketball.
Oh, I love it, dude. That and Summer League. I watch the Drew League when they do reruns of it.
You and our friend Alex Kennedy from BasketballInsiders.com are the only 2 people in the world who watch NBA preseason basketball.
That's accurate. But
postseason baseball, though.
Yeah, when my Cubs play.
My
Cubs play.
Sean Callahan of HuskerOnline.com mentioned it. He's a big Dodgers fan. He mentioned it to me the other day that the first Friday of the division series games is kind of like the March Madness of baseball. You get 4 games throughout the day, all divisional series games, and it really starts, like around noon, 1 o'clock, and then goes all the way till the end of the night. Kind of a fun day for baseball fans. But Scott, who do you think is ripe for an upset in these first divisional series? I have my pick.
I think it was the team that played last night, the Arizona Diamondbacks. I think they have a rotation that can go hand in hand with really anyone in all of Major League Baseball. And it's such a fun team to watch. I think that the Dodgers are going to give them problems at times, but Arizona, was just stout near the end of the year. But if it's not Arizona, I really struggle seeing the New York Yankees being able to pull off a big run. But I think the Houston Astros, if they're able to get past the Red Sox, could really be a problem for the Cleveland Indians as well.
Scotty, you smell like the ocean because you are salty with that take. But
what does that mean?
I think you're just a little bit upset with. You're still a little bit salty about the D-backs getting you upset last night.
No, I just picked Arizona. If I said Arizona's going to get
conspiracy hot takes. We've been really extra this segment. David, who's ripe for an upset?
You know what? I'm going to go the opposite. I think the Cleveland Indians are due for an upset. I think if Aaron Judge can really emerge himself as not just a star, but a superstar, if he can help lead that team. The Yankees are very on and off. I don't like them at all, but they are very on and off. But if that team can get the bats going, I don't see Cleveland to be able to stay up with them. I think the Yankees are probably the best chance for a runaway series or getting blown out. I don't really see there's going to be much in between with them, but I'm going to go with my gut, and I'm going to say the Yankees pull off the upset.
Guys, my takes are not often hot, but when they are, I tend to stick with them, and I've had this take for over 2 months now that the Houston Astros are going to get swept in the first round of the Major League Baseball playoffs.
They're up 2-0 right now in the second inning.
Well, you know what? That's going to change pretty quick.
Believe.
It's only the second inning, and I truly believe that they do get swept in this first series by the Boston Red Sox, because I saw them in person get swept by the Chicago White Sox back in August. That is about the worst series loss you can have in baseball. The Chicago White Sox, whose average age of player is 14 years old right now.
and their announcer, Hawk Harrelson, is just, he's a landmark in his own sense, not because he's so great. I don't know if you guys...
great. I love Hawk.
Have you ever heard when they lose on a walk-off, he always finishes with, and this ball game is over.
Hawk Harrelson.
You know what?
Legend.
I think I'm going to go with my second team since Sky put 2 teams, and it's going to take you both by surprise. I think the Cubs could be in for a letdown. I'm saying this because I saw a picture of Bryce Harper and the cleats.
His hair looks better than ever.
Oh, yeah. But the cleats he's wearing, it's all dedicated to Las Vegas because he is from Las Vegas. And I could see him just coming out, having an all-timer great series and dedicating it to the city of Las Vegas. So the thing's bigger in baseball, but I got to say, I think the Nationals could come out and they could come out firing.
Well,
That'd be a hell of a story.
I'm going to say this. I think Washington, I think Bryce Harper, even without having that extra passion, is still maybe the best baseball player in all of the majors. So I think this does motivate him, but I think Washington is a far better team than Chicago is.
I mean, the Cubs won the regular season in the series against them.
I know,
but to be fair, here's the thing, though, Sky. I still have two. Will they pitch to Bryce Harper? Because they have not pitched to Bryce Harper very much this whole season.
And you got to consider that the major stat factor here in that series is the fact that the city of Washington is terrible when it comes to playoff sports. The Washington Capitals had the best record in the NHL every single year, and they flop. The Wizards flop when they're good. The Redskins can't win a playoff game.
That's fine.
The city of Washington is. The Nationals are good every year, and then they flop in the playoffs. The city of Washington cannot do well in the playoffs, and I think that's the big stat here that's going to hold Washington back. Cubs advance to the NLCS.
See, I agree that
that's
city,
a lot of great statistical analysis.
Yeah. I was gonna say that's one heck of an analysis right there. Stats with On the Spill Sports Show.
Spill stats.
But I mean, the biggest problem Washington has had is their injuries. If they don't suffer so many injuries in the regular season, I think they might finish with the best record in baseball because that lineup is scary. That rotation, they're starting Strasburg in that first game against the Cubs, which means Max Scherzer starting game 2. If the Cubs can't win one in Washington, it's going to be, I think, a straight series sweep for the Nationals. But I don't know. I know the Cubs have been hot. It's in the second half of the year, but if they struggle early on, I really don't trust that back half of the rotation for the Cubs to get it done.
Guys, I don't know about you, but this to me seems like it's the best MLB playoffs that I've been alive for. I mean, it just looks like on paper
in terms of balance.
Yeah, in terms of balance, in terms of teams that have been on runs this year, in terms of wow, this is going to be a great series. The Cubs are the 3 seed in the National League with probably the most talented roster in baseball. Arizona had to win a tough wild card game against Colorado as the hottest team in baseball. You saw incredible streaks in the regular season by both Cleveland and LA, who have locked up the 1 seeds in both leagues. It's just a really incredible playoff shaping up to be.
You're exactly right. But I might be in the. I was surprised. I might be in the unpopular opinion, and that never happens.
You've never had an unpopular opinion.
No, never. I never trigger anybody. But when it comes to baseball, at least for me, the hotter team, I don't trust teams that end the regular season hot. I don't trust them going into the postseason.
Really?
I don't.
Eli Manning says, "Boo you."
I feel like there's a way that teams just before the teams are struggling or, just playing average, they get the chance to really ramp it up. And they get time to really dig deep within themselves. It comes down to experience. It comes down to coaching. And it comes down to a lot of other factors, but not just the teams that are hot to end the regular season. So I've always been one wary to pick the teams that end the regular season hot in the postseason.
I'm going to counter you on that. I do think that there is a whole lot more that goes into it, but the Chicago Cubs last year didn't go into the postseason kind of shaky. That was a team that was playing good baseball.
Let's go. Let's get it cranked up.
Exactly. And that's that. If you're going into the postseason, unsure of your rotation, unsure of how your lineup's going to prevail, that's a big problem. And so, yeah, there's obviously the master art of choking. Look at our good friends over out in L.A., the Dodgers. I feel like they've had a great team for the last 5 years, and yet they can't put it together.
It seemed like they had it put together against that Cubs team last year, but Cubs, again, team of destiny, it seemed like.
And the Cubs were hot, it felt like, all year long. So I do think that if you're playing good baseball, it's a totally different game. You look at, I'm going to use the Colorado Rockies because I know it so well.
Let's do it,
but
dude.
even in 2007, they won 18 of 20 games ending the regular season, and then went on to sweep in every single series they played in. It does say a lot. If your team is really connecting on all cylinders, Arizona Diamondbacks are a team. Yeah, it was a tough game against Colorado last night, but that's why I think their series against LA should be so interesting, because both of those teams are hot going into the postseason.
They are. The only thing I'll say to that, too, is, Scotty, a couple of those series and the way the Cubs series played out, they went too long for as high as that team was. And that was my whole point, is they may still win, but I'm not going to comfortably pick them. And odds are I'm probably going to pick against them. But at least in baseball, for me, it's a completely – I know regular season, postseason, but to me, it's truly a new season when it comes into postseason. The way you play the game's different. Your rotations look completely different. I'll use the Cubs for an example. They used Aroldis Chapman so much in the postseason, especially the World Series. And at the end of the day, that almost cost them in the World Series. By the last game, they overplayed him because he was just too tired to go, and that's when the Indians made their run back.
Let me pose this to you guys before we head to our break on the hour. Which team would surprise you most if they won the World Series?
I think it would be I think it'd either be Boston or New York, actually. I don't really have confidence in either of those two teams making a run at the postseason. New York's rotation has been good at times, and they did have to make some moves getting Canely in the middle of the season to really bulk up that bullpen. But that's why I'm unsure about New York. And then Boston, they'd have two tough series ahead, against Houston and, of course, against either Cleveland or New York. I just have hard time seeing them making it out of even the AL.
Sky, normally I'd agree with you on this, but the only reason why I'm not is because Boston and New York have proven to be two of the best baseball franchises. So whenever I hear their name and World Series champion next to them, it doesn't surprise me. I'm going to go with the Houston Astros for that kind of exact reason. I can't remember, at least in my lifetime, when the Astros have been anywhere near as good as they are now. But it's still a culture shock to me, though. When I seriously started watching baseball. And that's probably
Astros were in the tank when you started watching baseball.
They were bad. Or I think they were the worst team in baseball for a couple years in a row at minimum.
Boy, that AL switched things up with them, huh?
But,
yeah, it did.
I think that especially with Houston, with everything that's happened, and just the pro culture in Houston, kind of like what you were saying about Washington, the pro culture in Houston, it's going to take a lot for me to really see them winning it. So I think that they'd be my biggest surprise.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Scotty. I'm going to say New York as well. It just, I don't think, or Boston fits right there, because I think Boston could very well make a run, and they look like a team built for the postseason with just guys that can get it done, and they have a world championship this century. I guess New York does too, but I think this is too young of a New York team to really make a serious run.
No, totally.
And didn't end on the most solid ground, didn't end the season on the most solid ground, just kind of won enough games to get in. It felt like with the American League, the other teams just kind of trailed off. The teams didn't really win their way into that wild card game. It seemed like the divisions were pretty set by the time it was all said and done. And so either of those American League teams that would have gotten out of the wild card, I wouldn't have been very confident in.
Like I said, it's just the only reason why I'm not picking them is strictly because of the cities that they're associated with and championship. New York and championship makes sense.
Heading to the hour break here on the Spill Sports Show, but we got about another 45 minutes of steaming sports talk coming at you. Coming up next, Nebraska basketball started practice last weekend. We'll talk about how the Huskers shape up with their most talented roster under Tim Miles, and maybe their most talented roster in this century. We'll talk about that coming up next, and hear a little bit about Tim Miles' squad. That's coming up next, right here on the Spill Sports Show.
Dad, I'm hungry. Why don't we have anything to eat?
Those are words you never want to hear as a parent. But unfortunately, putting food on the table is a constant struggle for many low-income families here in Lincoln, and they don't have the necessary skills to get and maintain a job. They rely on volunteers at the Center for People in Need that can help them through the struggle. You can make a difference in their lives by getting involved in one of the many volunteer programs that the Center for People in Need offers. For more information, please visit centerforpeopleinneed.org.
We are live outside the home of Joe and Rosie Goddard, where a pretty big tickle fight broke out just minutes ago. Sources say their father instigated the laughter. Let's go inside for a comment. Apparently, they have no comment. Dads, let this be a reminder that it only takes a moment to make a moment. Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
She didn't want it, yet she got it. She got something no one deserves. Abuse. To start healing, you can't be silent. Your voice has to be heard. Voices of Hope provides free, confidential services on dating, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking issues. Walk-in hours are available Tuesday afternoons from 2 to 6 in the City Campus Union. For more information, visit www.voicesofhopelincoln.com. Voices of Hope. With your voice and others, find hope.
Having a place to go after school will make you a better student. Having an outlet to express yourself will make you a better artist. Having something to do together will make you a better family. At the Y, we're helping build better friends, listeners, writers, swimmers, scientists, and musicians, one chance at a time. Give the gift of opportunity. Support the Y at ymca.net. The Y, for a better us.
Whether college graduation is in a few months or in a few years, gaining hands-on experience in your field of interest is a must. While a college degree is a fruitful step towards acquiring a top-tier career, today's employers are looking for college grads that already have some experience under their belt. Here at Husker HireLink, we're here to ensure that you're the person they're looking for. By simply uploading your current resume and skills, we can connect you with hundreds of employers seeking to hire college students to fill their intern, part-time, and full-time positions. Log on to HuskerHireLink.com today to get started.
Think fast. In the short time it takes to listen to this message, a small flame can turn into a big fire. Several minutes more, and thick, poisonous smoke may have filled your lungs and reduced your ability to respond. Give it 5, and your entire home may be filled with flames.
Keep breathing. We've got you.
Don't let your world go up in smoke. Have working smoke alarms and practice an escape plan for you and your loved ones. Learn more at usfa.fema.gov, because fire is everyone's fight.
The Spill Sports Show with Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers. Never miss a show again. Check out our podcast at thespillkrnu.wordpress.com.
The 76ers could have drastically improved their organization by drafting Walter Pitchford.
Quite frankly, if he wins a Super Bowl, I'll direct it 30 for 30 on it.
I've watched this kid play multiple times on national television.
You like watching kids, David?
Dude, I love basketball. Excuse me.
The Spill Sports Show. Thursday drive time from 3 to 5 on KRNU.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy! It's a home run! Man, woman, and child did that. Put them in the aisle. Johnny the Jet Rogers just tore them loose from their shoes. You believe in miracles? Yes!
through LeBron. He takes a fadeaway for the win. He knocked it down!
There goes Davis. Oh, my God! Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
You can't believe what just happened. What a time to be alive.
Hit me with the horn, 20. Keep making noise. Keep making noise. Yeah. Oh. Here we go now. 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 Check it out.
In just a few months, that'll be a DMX playing in Nebraska's entrance to April, Nebrapril, as Scott Ayers calls it.
Give me Nebrapril, baby. They're coming back.
Leading into the second hour of the Spill Sports Show, Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers, talking about our absurd expectations for Nebraska ball this season. But taking a realistic point of view, Tim Miles has his most talented roster here at Lincoln, and five-star transfer Isaac Copeland immediately eligible for the season. They're getting Anton Gill back. You got guys like James Palmer, Isaiah Roby, Glenn Watson, Thomas Allen. And David, I know you're excited about something, but it's not that Cubs hat.
I was going to be excited until I heard Nebrapril for the last 30 times in the last 5 minutes.
We have fun in breaks in the Spill Sports Show.
They do. I just sit there and bash my head against a wall.
Everything is fueled by Arby's.
Everything is fueled by their hatred and trolling of me. I'm excited about Nebraska ball. You know what? I'm calling it Nebraska basketball now because I can't say anything anymore.
It really sounds like you're excited about Nebraska. I'm excited.
Who's excited about Nebrapril?
I'm about to walk out of the show. I'm excited though.
He's done it before, kids.
I've done it like twice, I think. All right. Anyway.
Back to basketball.
Back to basketball. I'm excited to see what Isaac Copeland does. I think Tim Miles said he could expect him to be the second leading scorer and third leading rebounder on this team. I think that's fair expectations. I'm also excited to see this is the year all eyes will be on Jordy Chumanga, I feel like, because this is a guy that showed flashes of great potential last year, but couldn't put it together consistently. But it's not like he had to build up any muscle mass or any more size because he's already D1 ready.
He had to cut.
He had a little. He needed more so stamina. He needed more so that speed. He needed more so that footwork. He needed a post move because there were times last year where he'd put the ball in, but everyone's kind of looking at each other like, what did he do? How did he put that in? How did he do that? But he's also need to be more aggressive with his size. I know he was trying not to get fouls called on. I know that's the biggest trouble, I think, with freshman big guys is they get a lot of fouls calling them that they aren't used to getting called in high school. But he needs to go up, jump up, two-hand grab, immediately go back up for a slam instead of kind of that tentative layup that he did at times. But we'll see what he does. And if you're talking about a guy that really made big jumps, I think Isaiah Roby could be really, really good this year if he has confidence in his jump shot. But I know Matt and I have seen him a couple times. It's been on social media a couple times, but Isaiah Roby looks big. He looks cut. And this is a guy that's ready to really take over. Remember the first game of the year last year, I think it was the exhibition game. He blocked the shot, took it coast for coast, and one hand jammed it like 2 steps inside the free throw line. And expectations skyrocketed at that point. But this is a year, I think, where he could put more so together. There are a lot of X factors, a lot of stuff that could happen. A lot of big question marks, though, as well. So we'll see what kind of game plan that Miles has thrown together. But there should be buzz around Lincoln. There should be excitement.
And the best part of that game plan that Tim Miles could put together is the number of different game plans he can put together this year with a very versatile lineup. You look at Jordy Chumanga at the 5. If they want to go with the smaller lineup, Miles said in Monday's press conference that Isaiah Roby can play the 5 in a smaller lineup, be a Channing Frye type player in the middle. I mean, you look at guys that they can run with a bigger lineup. They can go with Chumanga at the 5, Copeland at the 4, Roby at the 3, Palmer at the 2, and Watson at the 1, or even Taylor at the 1. You have 3 capable point guards in Glenn Watson, Evan Taylor, and Thomas Allen this year. You have freshmen that can come off the bench and shoot. You have a guy like Jack McVeigh, who, Scott, now has a beard.
Jack McTray, born on June 27th, 1996, guys.
Are we doing the David Eickholt Wikipedia search thing? I remember the day David did the Wikipedia search for a hockey guy and listed his full name and birthplace and hometown. That was a great day here on the Spill Sports Show.
Let's just say he's his birth city is Canberra, and he was from Australia. The Australian Institute of Sports was his high school, and so honestly, he's got a beard now. He's gonna splash some trays.
If anyone was here at the time, I'd like to just say that I did that as a complete joke, and they took it.
It was a well done
seriously.
joke. It was a well done joke, but I knew exactly what you were doing as you were typing it in on your computer.
All I'm saying is Nebraska will happen because of guys like Jack McVay and their perimeter shooting. He's gotten better with driving in the post. I love McTray. I think he's going to have a great year.
Well, it would take quite a stroke of miracle for Nebraska to make it Nebraska, but Nebrarch, that doesn't work quite as well. But for Nebraska to make a run into March Madness and make a run into the NCAA tournament is not that far-fetched with this roster. And if they put it together and don't suffer too many injuries, I think it could definitely happen with this team. Maybe not make a run in March, but make the tournament is definitely not out of the question for this squad. But the Big Ten, David, is a lot better this year, and you look at Michigan State at the top to start.
I mean, it's not out of question right now because the teams are 0-0. It's nothing against Nebraska because they do have a lot more talent, I feel like, than they've had in recent years. But the Big Ten is scary, and there's a lot of question marks. And like Michigan State is clearly the best because Miles Bridges shocked the world and said, "I'm going back to Michigan State."
Lottery pick.
And everyone freaked out. And they should freak out because he is an absolute freak of nature.
Terrorized Nebraska last year.
Minnesota is another team that's going to be good. Northwestern has their pair of guards back, Brian McIntosh and Scotty Lindsey.
Scotty Lindsey's a great guy.
And then, Michigan will be decent. There's a lot of teams that are going to be. Iowa will be decent. There's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that will make it tough. And the reason why it'll be tough for Nebraska to really make the run is because they can't go under 500 in conference play and expect to make the tournament.
No, you're exactly right.
Going 500 in this conference with Nebraska's youth, it's going to be a challenge, I think.
You look at other teams that are looking to put it together. I mean, I think everybody's expecting down year for Illinois, Ohio State, Rutgers. Those are the pretty clear bottom three. And then you got a jumbled mess in the middle because Illinois, new coach Brad Underwood, not returning a whole lot of talent from last year. Just kind of a reset for Illinois this year. Ohio State, definitely under a reset. Pulled the Butler coach, let go of Thad Matta retired, and just kind of a mess in Columbus right now. They'll rebuild pretty quickly with the talent they're able to attract there. But Illinois, Ohio State, Rutgers, bottom three. And then you got a little bit of a jumbled mess in the middle. This is supposed to be the year for Penn State to take a big step up. Yeah. Iowa returns most of their lineup except Peter Jock, who is a huge loss. But you return almost everybody, sort of like Nebraska returns almost everybody except Ty Webster, save for a couple transfers. And a lot of unknowns surrounding Nebraska right now. A lot of knowns surrounding Michigan State and that great recruiting class and Miles Bridges and Tom Izzo. And you look at what Michigan State can do. That is Nebraska's first conference game. It's on the road, and it's at the beginning of December. And then they turn right around and play Minnesota at the Pinnacle Bank Arena. And then they play Kansas at home a week later. What a brutal stretch to begin December. Creighton's wedged in there, too, on a Wednesday up in Omaha. Can Nebraska survive the beginning of December, Scotty?
Well, let me make a noise for you guys real quick. I don't know if you hear that, but that's 10 Miles' hot seat getting warmer and warmer as the seasons go on, and he is on the hot seat in Lincoln. So, yeah, this stretch in December is going to be brutal, but it is crucial for Nebraska to have at least some success. You can't expect 5-0 in that run against Michigan State, Minnesota, Creighton, Kansas, but you have to...
It'd be hard to expect 5-0 in 4 games.
Oh, I mean, excuse me, I saw the 5th game, but it was UTSA, and I said, no way those boys from San Antonio are as good as Michigan State.
I'm going to interject real quick on that one because
good.
Nebraska has dropped a bad game to a non-conference foe, but they've all been on Sunday afternoons the previous 3 years, and there's no game no non-conference home game on Sunday afternoons this year. So that could play a factor in Nebraska getting up for these smaller games, and I think this is the year they don't drop that one.
Well, exactly, and so you have to hope for at least one win in those conference matchups between Michigan State and Minnesota. But then, of course, Creighton, Kansas, those are just 2 games where I mean, it is a David versus Goliath type of matchups for.
Could this be the year though against Creighton? They lost a lot.
I think it could be, and obviously at the beginning of every year, there's always a chance for this Husker team, and that Kansas game at home. So you think, oh, maybe home court advantage, but that game will be brutally tough for the Huskers. Nebraska has to have good months in November and December if they even want to have a chance at making even a run towards March.
And I do want to. I know I mentioned some teams in the Big Ten that are going to be pretty decent, but there's also two teams I didn't mention that are good enough that need to be re-mentioned. Wisconsin, number 1. I didn't mention them. They still have Ethan Happ.
They just reload every year.
Every year.
They lost a lot once again, and
they're going to be ready though, especially with Ethan Happ, who's going to be in there, and Maryland, yeah, they have
once again.
Justin Jackson, they have Kevin Herter, and they got guys that are really hungry. And remember, Kevin Herter was a top 20 kid last year,
and a top 20 weird face in the Big Ten. That kid has a weird face. I don't know. I don't care what you say about his basketball. He has a weird face, and I will stick to that for a long time.
Sorry, buddy. You know what? We all have different types. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But, those are teams worth mentioning. And even there, at that point, that's 7 or 8 teams that I think we have to say going in the season that are better than Nebraska going in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But, you look at the strongest year in the Big Ten, top to bottom, RPI-wise. The strongest year RPI-wise for the Big Ten was the 2013-2014 season. And Nebraska finished 4th in the league that year and had a double bye in the Big Ten basketball tournament. And so that's Miles mentioned that on Monday at the press conference, and it's hard to believe that even in some of the best years, injuries play a factor, time of the year plays a factor, classes play a factor. These guys are still student athletes, and sometimes we forget that as sports talk hosts, but it could be a very interesting Big Ten year, and I think it'll be a lot better year for the entire league than last year when the
I think they're the best. I think it's the best conference in America. I don't think there's any question. I think top to bottom, this is the most talented conference in America. I think it has to be.
And they can send a message to that with the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
And
again,
Scotty's giving me the kind of dog, glare eyes over there, shaking his head. Scotty, is there a conference better?
You boys ever heard of the Mountain West?
Oh.
Colorado State. Tim Miles, former. Well, what a time we have here on the Spill Sports Show. The Mountain West, top to bottom. New Mexico, San Diego
Boise.
State, BYU, Boise. Is BYU still in the Mountain West tonight? Or are they no, they're West Coast Conference. But the Mountain West, certainly a formidable team to be or a conference to be reckoned with. Honestly, the Mountain West is nothing to scoff at in basketball. I mean, you look at Colorado State consistently challenging the top teams every year. New Mexico's in there every year. San Diego State's in there every year. There's some good programs down there that can really challenge, but it's nothing close to the Big Ten or the ACC, so I'll put that to bed right now. David, do you think the ACC has anything to say about the Big Ten being the best conference? I mean, you look at the ACC getting, half the Elite Eight again last year?
You know what I'll say about that? I'll answer that question tomorrow afternoon, because keep in mind the sanctions from North Carolina come out tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you look at Duke. If you're just looking at one example,
my Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah, you look at Duke and Marvin Bagley and what they were
the best player in the world.
Yeah, your hot take of Marvin Bagley being the best player, NBA player, 7 years from last year. So 6.
I got 6 to go. So I'll have 5 years in the league when that happens.
All right, if it happens, we're buying you a cheesecake.
All right, I'll take a cheesecake.
Yeah, you're getting a full cheesecake, not from Cheesecake Factory.
Is it Oreo?
No, it's a
Oreo.
It's a Super Saver cheesecake.
So is it Oreo though?
You'll get whatever they put in it. But Duke, again, stacked. Great recruiting class. I mean, you look at the guys they return, and then Coach K always coaching those guys up. Is this the year that Duke breaks through once again?
I think it has to be. The only thing I can't even think of anything that could stop them besides themselves, honestly. Marvin Bagley's there. They have all the talent in the world, but there's a team that I think if they get matched up against in March – No, March. I don't know. Whatever.
Duprel.
Nabrarch. That's what it
Duprel.
You know who I think will give them a challenge, though, and I think they'll be a lot better than people think. I think Missouri is going to be really, really good.
Which is so weird to say the University of Missouri is going to be so good at something.
Michael Porter Jr. is for real.
And they got a 5-star
Jeremiah
center from
Tillman.
Illinois. Yeah.
I'm not completely sold on Tillman.
Freshman
But
centers are hit or miss.
But he's good. Then they have the 4-star point guard, and they have Mike. And keep in mind, Michael Porter Jr.'s brother's a high 4-star too, and nobody ever talks about him. Jonte Porter, he's a top 50 guy, and everybody's like, "Oh, your brother's so good." But I mean, he's another guy that's going to contribute to that team, and they're going to be deadly. But at the end of the day, ACC may have the top dogs, right? If your top teams in each conference go at it, I think the ACC might have the advantage. But top to bottom overall talent, it has to be the Big Ten. It has to be the Big Ten. It doesn't make sense otherwise, I think.
Well, we might see a little black and gold in Ms. Arch this year. So
why are we a show?
I can't get behind Missouri. They don't flow well. Mizarch, Mizipril, I can't. I can't do it.
I think it
How'd you get? Wait, how'd you Mizipril?
Mizipril.
Ms. Arch. I think Ms. Arch is
I
our
thought
thing.
Ms. Arch is all right.
They make it to the Elite Eight and then they choke like
February.
like Kansas does every year. Coming up
But
next.
Kansas doesn't even make it that far usually.
Coming up next, we will turn our focus back to football and discuss a little bit more going into this weekend's matchup, Nebraska versus Wisconsin in the Big Ten West, what looks like the Big Ten West showdown of the year. If Wisconsin wins this one, the Big Ten West is all but locked up in favor of the Badgers. If Nebraska wins, it creates a whole jumbled mess at the top. We'll talk about possible Big Ten scenarios coming up next. A little bit more football talk coming your way on the Spill Sports Show. Stay with us.
Whether college graduation is in a few months or in a few years, gaining hands-on experience in your field of interest is a must. While a college degree is a fruitful step towards acquiring a top-tier career, today's employers are looking for college grads that already have some experience under their belt. Here at Husker HireLink, we're here to ensure that you're the person they're looking for. By simply uploading your current resume and skills, we can connect you with hundreds of employers seeking to hire college students to fill their intern, part-time, and full-time positions. Log on to HuskerHireLink.com today to get started.
Hey.
Hi, nice neighborhood. You must have a strong community association board.
I don't pay any attention to that stuff.
How do you know the board and community manager are making the right decisions?
I don't, but what can I do?
Connect with CAI.
CA what?
CAI, Community Associations Institute. They're a nonprofit group with free resources for your board, training for community managers, and information for homeowners.
Protect your investment.
Here are 3
Responsible
important
community
reasons why your son or daughter should play a sport in high school.
Number 1.
High school sports teach valuable life lessons like self-discipline and time management skills.
2.
Teens who play a high school sport have better grade point averages.
And number 3.
High school sports are safer than ever before.
This message presented by the Nebraska School Activities Association and the Nebraska State Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association.
The risk of an American man developing cancer in his lifetime is a little less than 1 in 2. The risk of an American woman developing cancer in her lifetime is a little more than 1 in 3. But the death rates of cancer have been declining in men and women since the early 1990s.
I relay for the support of my sister.
I relay for the support of my grandfather.
I relay for the support of my uncle.
Keep helping those in need by participating in Relay for Life. Join us for Relay for Life at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln each year to fight back against cancer. Sign up for your community event or donate at relayforlife.org.
Welcome to my show.
Coming back in from the break, discussing the iconic Nebraska football dabber from Friday night's game against Illinois. It was...
What a dapper young man.
Yeah, it was meme-worthy. It was incredible. Colin Andersen, I believe his name was, a Nebraska ball boy, furiously dabbing 4 times the quadruple dab.
He's my spirit animal.
The quadruple dab as Stanley Morgan waltzed into the end zone on what was like a 15-yard stiff arm or something
That was
like
a 17-yard. Yeah, and he stiff-armed the guy.
Oh, wow. Stanley Morgan might be back for good. Even after 4 drops last week, he might be back for good, and stiff arming that
catches.
guy into the end zone. Yeah, it still led the Huskers in receiving yards, well on his way to being Nebraska's first 1,000-yard receiver in school history. Definitely Tanner Lee's favorite target so far this year. And switching our focus to this weekend's matchup, how big will he be against Wisconsin's secondary, in which the corners might be the weak point of it?
I think he has to be one of the biggest X factors in the game, and I say that because this Wisconsin defense is 4th in the country in rushing defense. They don't allow a lot. They allow 74 rushing yards a game. They know how to defend the run. But the thing is, Tanner Lee, as we've kind of all seen, he's very prone to staring down one receiver. He knows who he wants to throw it to on that route, and he does not look around. So if he can put the ball anywhere near Stanley Morgan, he has to make the catches, even if it's pretty difficult catch or easy. Every single catch has to be made by him. No more drops.
I will agree with you, but I'll also counter on that. I think it's too far half and half for Tanner Lee right now, because there's too often he locks into one receiver, and then you see other throws where he will perfectly go through his progressions. And it's a weird mix that you really don't understand with Tanner Lee right now, or that it's impossible as an observer to understand with Tanner Lee right now, because there's not a certain situation where he doesn't go through his progressions. It seems like it's just random. And he will lock in on a receiver at just the most random times. And usually, like you said, that receiver is Stanley Morgan. How does Tanner Lee face this very multiple Wisconsin pressure and go through those progressions and make those smart decisions, Scott?
Yeah, well, something that we saw, I believe, in the 4th quarter of that Illinois game, something he really hasn't done all season long, he threw the ball away. He threw it out of bounds. And I remember the people I was with, they're like, wow, he threw it away.
I said the same thing. I said the same thing to Matt. I said the same thing to Matt.
It was a good throw.
And you know, people were saying it was his best play of the game, because he finally made a smart read when no receiver was open. Now, there was a point in the game where either Hoppus or Ketter really had to save him from an interception.
Hoppus.
It was a great play, but yeah, I mean, it comes down to if he can get 3 or 4 seconds to make a couple of reads, that's huge. And going back to Stanley Morgan Jr., I know he had, 98 receiving yards against Illinois?
Yeah.
But, I mean, the guy could have had 130, 140 if it wasn't for a couple of his drops.
Yeah.
So
even cut those drops in half, he has 120 at least,
exactly.
probably.
And so, I mean, I don't know if it's a mental thing right now for Stanley or what, because it's such a polarizing thing for him right now, because he is on pace to really set a type of record that has not been seen at Nebraska, but there might even be an asterisk next to it saying he could have had this many more yards if he made the extra catches. So, I mean, you just have to really think about it like that. And can the running backs pick up the extra blitzers that come in to give Lee more time?
And that's something I need to say too, is because this is the game where the offensive line proves if they're going to actually be this way the rest of the season, because Wisconsin's D-line, as we mentioned, Sky, is no joke. And Tanner Lee has proven, while he may be poised and, never feels rushed or, looks nervous or anything like that, he still makes bad decisions when he's been put in trouble. He can't escape like Taylor Martinez and Tommy Armstrong. Yeah. So this is the first time that any of those guys have really had to stay within their, as a wise man once said, stay in their lane and block really well. So it's going to come down, can Tanner Lee make smart decisions? If Mikael Wilbon can't go, can Jalen Bradley and especially Divino Zigbo get the run game going to make that play-action pass to DeMornay Pearsonell an actual threat? Because if they can't get the run game going, they're not going to bite on no play action. This is a Wisconsin very disciplined defense.
Well, it's going to be hard for Tanner Lee to play as bad as quarterbacks for Nebraska have played the last 3 years against Wisconsin. Absolutely astronomical numbers. Looked him up earlier this week. Very, very low pass efficiency percentages and low yards, and really not making much of an impact in the passing game. The running game has kept the Huskers in it the past couple of years, but it wasn't really even that. It was the defense. And Wisconsin kind of shooting themselves in the foot on offense like they have been prone to do with a very slow-paced, pro-style offense. And so I really do see another close game again this weekend because of that, because Nebraska is able to somehow, some way keep themselves in it. But like you guys said, Tanner Lee has got to take care of the football. And especially under that sort of pressure, take the sack. A punt is not the worst thing, especially against Wisconsin. A turnover is the worst thing.
Yeah.
You can take a 10, 15-yard sack and get the punt. I wouldn't care if Tanner Lee fumbles as long as, he gets out of the pocket and at least tries to make a play with it or tries to throw it away and doesn't try and force the ball into windows or, even worse, force it as he's getting taken down.
I mean, it's one of those things, too. You're exactly right. You can't force the ball on the spot because I'd argue that Wisconsin's defense over the last 10 years has been the most disciplined defense in the Big Ten. If you try to force a play, they will pick it off. That is how they are. You can't beat them with just, I'm going to try to be more athletic than the other team. It's not going to work against Wisconsin. They may not be the most athletic, but they are one of the most technically sound football teams in the country. Discipline.
And if you can beat Wisconsin over the top, try it. And if you have the time to try and beat Wisconsin over the top, maybe on a play action or maybe something where they don't disguise the rush very well or a 3-man rush or something like that, if you can beat Wisconsin over the top, try it. Because trying those vertical routes is much safer against this Wisconsin secondary instead of trying a route maybe on the edge. Nebraska will have some success over the middle in this game because the middle linebackers replacing starters for this year, Jack Sitchie and Zach Bond, and another middle linebacker that was the backup to Zach Bond, all injured for this game, all out for the season. So Nebraska will have some success passing.
And that's not insulting the guys taking him over because they've done a fine job, but they're no Jack Sitchie.
But a better job in run support.
Yeah.
And it takes an experienced middle linebacker to be able to drop into pass coverage. And I think Tanner will be able to have some success over the middle. The problem is if he tries to go wide, if he tries to go on those deep fade routes, that's where balls can get picked off. Verticals are where you want to go against a Wisconsin defense like this. And if you throw it deep and it's overthrown,
go by the sideline or over the middle. There's one name that you guys both know I'm about to say, I think, that Dakota Dixon.
Yeah.
This guy is a flat-out baller and a flat-out winner.
A fierce hitter as well.
Because keep in mind, all he does is make plays. He had the game-sealing pick last year against LSU. He's had another game-winning interception. I can't remember who it was against. He's forced fumbles. He is all over the field. And if Tanner Lee tries those, tight spots, fit in those tight windows that those other defensive players have, we've seen drop time and time again, Dixon will not drop it. He is very disciplined, a very good catcher. Who he reminds me of? He reminds me in a little bit of a way of Bob Sanders. By the way, he's a big-time hitter, maybe a little bit taller, but he makes plays, and he's a big-time hitter. And that's just a guy that you definitely need to watch out for.
I agree, and I know we're giving some slack on Tanner Lee, but I think that the offensive line has to give him time. I mean, they have struggled throughout the season, but I know Rutgers and Illinois aren't the greatest, pieces of stats to draw information from, but they performed well. Brendan Hymas, the true freshman, played phenomenal in those two games. So, the offensive line does need to give Lee some time. And even if you have to throw McNitt or Zigbo in the backfield on the third down conversion just to block, just so Lee can read through his progressions, give him that time because when he does and he's able to step up in the pocket, he makes a very pretty throw.
I was discussing this with other reporters this week, and I don't know if you guys agree on this, but if you really look at the vitriol thrown towards Mike Cavanaugh and the vitriol thrown toward this offensive line, a lot of it's been unwarranted. They've had one bad game this season against Northern Illinois, and other than that, they've been pretty effective overall, more so in the passing game, I would suppose, against Arkansas State, also more so in the passing game trying to play catch-up against Oregon, but two really good performances against on the ground against Rutgers and Illinois, and they've really started to impose their will up there. Not being a dominating offensive front, but not playing badly whatsoever. And so I think one bad loss is really clouding people's perception of this offensive line and saying that it's a huge problem on this team. While they may not be a dominating force, I don't think they've been too much of a problem in those other four games at all.
Well,
if you look at the numbers.
Agree or disagree on that. And the reason why I say that is because I think Arkansas State, it was okay. Not bad. It was a pretty decent showing.
192 from Trey Bryant helped.
Yeah, exactly. Oregon, I'm not comfortable saying that just because of the first half. The first half, they just did not put themselves in a position to do anything. And, they like I said, like you said, they all played well the second half. But because that first half as a team was so bad, it's hard to really, for me to say that was good. Northern Illinois,
they were dominated on time
Northern
of possession
Illinois,
in that
it was
first
bad.
half against Oregon. They were dominated on time of possession.
Yeah, but that's because Oregon was scoring on 2 or 3 plays.
Exactly. Yeah, but what I'm saying about Oregon is the fact that Trey Bryant went over 100 in that game once again, and they didn't have too much trouble in pass protection outside of that final pick because there 2 of those were on Tanner Lee, and one of them bounced out of Stanley Morgan's hands.
It's one of those things, though, too, is I know it's very rarely that I ever blame one person for an interception. I usually split between the receiver, the quarterback, and even the offensive line. Because at the end of the day, they still could have given Tanner Lee more time so we didn't feel like he had to make those bad throws.
You're right. Yeah.
And that's why I still hold him accountable for it. Maybe that's not entirely fair, but that's just my critique of almost any turnover, at least in terms of throwing interceptions. But like you said, Matt, this is the weekend, as we've already repeated about 5 times, this is the weekend it's going to really come into fruition of how good this offensive line actually is and if they've grown up. And this, you used your for Tim Miles. This is the game where Mike Cavanaugh could turn off that burner or it's going to start whistling.
Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, Scott Ayers with you right here on the Spill Sports Show. About last 10 minutes, wrapping it up, talking about Nebraska versus Wisconsin. And guys, I think building off of what you were saying, David, and building off that this weekend could be a turning point for Nebraska, I get the feeling that this is going to be one of those games where Nebraska, I don't know if it could necessarily be a turning point because you win this game, and I still think they match up terribly against Ohio State. I don't think this team has the talent, has the discipline ready to play and beat an Ohio State team, save for an inordinate amount of Buckeye mistakes next week in Lincoln. And I think I will stick to my prediction that I do think Nebraska wins this game against Wisconsin, but I also will stick to the prediction that if they do, Nebraska fans are going to think everything is fixed when really everything is not. And I still think they drop one more that they're not supposed to drop. I think they drop Northwestern at home. I think they get lucky and beat Purdue on the road, but it's going to be closer than people think,
I got to ask you, though, is there really a game they're not supposed to drop at this point? Because you look up and down that schedule.
Minnesota looks really bad.
I won't disagree there. Like I said, it's tough. But that's probably the game most likely. But I think every other game you have to be like, I can't say it's like that bad of a loss or they're supposed to take it. Like
you can't say. I'm talking about a favored loss. So Nebraska will be favored. If Nebraska is to beat Wisconsin this weekend, Nebraska will be favored against Northwestern, Purdue, Minnesota, and depending on the shaking out of the rest of the season, how both Nebraska and Iowa's seasons shake out, they will be favored, I guess, immediately after by FPI standards, ESPN's Football Power Index.
Which
immediately,
is,
I don't like that. No, I don't like that at all. But by FPI standards, directly following this game, if Nebraska is to win, they will be favored at home against Iowa, which I think it'll be a very close line when it comes right down to it on Black Friday. Either way, depending on how both seasons go for Nebraska and Iowa. So, I mean, you look at what Nebraska can do the rest of this season, whether they're favored or not, there's no guarantees left on this schedule. I mean, I expect Minnesota to tank a little bit, so I expect that to be a little bit more of a safe bet than most other games, but there's no guarantees left on this schedule. I just think Nebraska will, if they win this weekend, think the whole ship is righted when it's really not.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about that too, Matt, is that Ohio State and Penn State, those 2 games between Ohio State and Penn State for Nebraska, I mean, fans can't be expecting much in those 2 games. I think Penn State and Ohio State are just far more talented teams right now. I think Nebraska does match up a little bit better with Wisconsin, even though Wisconsin is still favored for a reason. But I do see Nebraska also winning this week, but I see them losing. I think I see them losing big against Ohio State.
I think fans.
I don't see 62-3, but I see a handy loss, like maybe 17.
I was gonna say 21. I was like, I think fans will be happy if they stick it within 17
I think
points
so
this
too.
season.
Yeah,
seriously.
I don't think it'll be like USC 2007, where they lose by 18, but they were down 39 in the third quarter. Things like that. I think it'll be, Nebraska will throw a few punches against Ohio State. I just don't think they have the horses to beat the Buckeyes right now. But as Mike Riley said, he doesn't want to talk about a stretch. This isn't baseball. He said that on Monday in his press conference, and they're focused on Wisconsin right now.
As they should be, because this is the one team, like I mentioned earlier, if you picked one team that Nebraska fans want to beat more than anything else, it's overwhelmingly Wisconsin.
And Nebraska players. We've talked to players this week, and usually, especially when they play Iowa every year, it baffles me how everybody's just like, oh, it's just another game, no rivalry involved. And then this week, against Wisconsin, players, coaches, everybody said this game means more. This game means more to Nebraska, especially with the way the games have gone the last 2 years. They've been so close to getting over the hump, and this puts Nebraska in possibly the driver's seat in the Big Ten West. I know 2 tough games remaining, 2 games where they will be decidedly underdogs in Ohio State and Penn State. But if you lose those 2 and Wisconsin drops one more, you win the West.
Serious question, though. Do you feel like this whole thing started when Melvin Gordon had that game?
Maybe.
I'm seriously, I don't know. I didn't know when it really kicked in. But is it because of do you think it's because of similar identities?
I think this whole thing started, I think this is much more two-way than Wisconsin fans would like to admit as far as when this whole thing started. Nebraska fans Nebraska fans will tell horror stories about 2011 in Madison and how they were treated when they went up to Madison. But from talking to other media members, Nebraska fans went up there cocky, went up there saying, okay, so we were good in the Big 12. We won the Big 12 North the past 2 years.
Sure.
We're going to take this conference by storm. We're going in a top 10 team. Lee Corso just picked us to beat Wisconsin on the road in our first Big 10 game, and it was a welcome to the Big 10 moment. I think the fire Wisconsin toward Nebraska started there, and then it really started to become returned by Nebraska the next year when they had that 21-point comeback to defeat Wisconsin here in Lincoln.
Really quick, that's the only win the past 6 against Wisconsin, right?
Only win Nebraska has had against Wisconsin since joining the Big Ten. And then Nebraska, like you mentioned, Melvin Gordon in the Big Ten championship game, that 70-31 really got the ball rolling, and then the punctuation mark in 2014 when Melvin Gordon went for 408 against the Big Red.
Ow.
But it started, I believe, in that Big Ten championship game when it was like, okay, this is something here.
It is, and even in 2015 when both teams struggled at times that year and Andy Janovich had that historic run for Husker fans, and Wisconsin misses a field goal, and I think fans were like, all right, we've got Wisconsin. Nebraska can't get a first down, and that was the case of the 2015 season. Couldn't put the game away, and Wisconsin was able to pull out a win. So I think there's just a bitter taste in Husker fans' mouths because of how close they've been in games and how badly they've been blown out in others.
And you look at some of the stories from that 2012, from before 2014, really. You look at Nebraska going into that Big Ten championship game, 10-2, having come back in pretty much every major win that year, eking out wins against really good teams in that 2012 season. And then you look at what they did against Wisconsin. There's stories of players hitting the bars the night before that game. There are stories of players being completely irresponsible, taking that game for granted, and then they get blown out of the water by consecutive jet sweeps over and over and over again, and 539 rushing yards for the Badgers in a game that Nebraska thought would lock up their first conference championship since 1999.
And I think you summed it up pretty perfectly, Matt. That's just stuff that when you're at this level and you're that far in, you still need to be responsible and never take any game for granted. We've seen how many times in college football and D1 sports of just teams that, and this is against teams that are super underdogs. I'm talking like 20-some points. Troy beat LSU last week. I mean, it's just stuff like that. And the fact that
Illinois beat Nebraska,
and the fact that players even think about taking a game for granted or going up cocky baffles me, especially with a game with that much riding on it and that much just everything. Because you have to wonder if Nebraska wins that game, how does the tone go for the next 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, Bo Pelini's not fired. If Nebraska
Bo Pelini's not fired. Next season, who knows?
Yep.
And I'm not trying to sit here and say they would have won a national title. They would have been, respected by everybody. Because at the end of the day, no team in Big Ten's respected by everybody. It's not. You can admit it, whatever way you want. They're not. but you can't take anything for granted, especially when you have guys like Melvin Gordon and that type of talent level on the other team, no matter how good you think you are.
Well, no final rundown today. We're going to wrap up here pretty quickly. I didn't even have a rant prepared, guys, to be fully honest.
I did. Oh, I had about 7.
Well, you're gonna get 8 rants next week.
Russell Westbrook's on Thunder for 5 more years. Let's go.
When we come back on the Spill Sports Show next week, same time, drive time, Thursday afternoon at 3, and you can listen to our recorded show tomorrow right here on 90.3 KRNU. That's the Spill Sports Show. Pay attention to our Twitter, at Spill Sports Show, at Matt_Reynoldson.
And at not Kevin Durant for another fake Kevin Durant account.
At David Rivals and at Hot Take Ayers for more information.
Nebranuary.
You should change it to Nebranuary, Sky.
For more information on the Spill Sports Show coming up tomorrow. But that'll do it for us here in studio. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much once again to John Veldheis of BadgerBlitz.com for joining us this week. And stay tuned for Husker Game Day coverage starting at 4:15 p.m. on Saturday before Nebraska takes on Wisconsin. That's 90.3 KRNU. That'll do it for us. Until then, have a great week and drive safe out there.
The Spill Sports Show with Matt Reynoldson, David Eickholt, and Scott Ayers. Never miss a show again. Check out our podcast at thespillkrnu.wordpress.com.
The 76ers could have drastically improved their organization by drafting Walter Pitchford.
Quite frankly, if he wins a Super Bowl, I'll direct it 30 for 30 on it.
I've watched this kid play multiple times on national television.
You like watching kids, David?
Dude, I love basketball. Excuse me.
The Spill Sports Show. Thursday drive time from 3 to 5 on KRNU.